We like nerd chicks.
It's the Nerd Chick here, and I'm speaking with
Hunter.
Okay, are you ready to play the great new game show, Nerd, Not a Nerd?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Here we go. First question, nerd or not a nerd?
I'm gonna have to go with not a nerd.
Not a nerd.
Not a nerd.
Not a nerd.
Not a nerd. You're both sure of that?
Yeah.
Sure.
He says not a nerd. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's Bill Gates.
Major nerd.
Okay.
Rich nerd, but major nerd.
Okay, let's try another. Ready?
All right.
Nerd or not a nerd?
Pretty nerdy.
I'm going not nerd on this one.
Not.
How about nerd?
Not a nerd.
Not a nerd.
Not a nerd.
He says not a nerd. Paul is correct. This is Jeremy Piven of the Entourage. Not a nerd.
Excellent.
He's good looking.
He's very cute, yeah.
Nerd.
Yeah, I'll go with nerd on this one.
Not a nerd.
Not a nerd. Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Absolutely positive not a nerd.
Not really, but I'm gonna just go with not a nerd.
Not.
Think about it.
Nope.
Not a nerd.
You sure about that?
Sure.
He says not a nerd, and the answer is... Oh, I'm sorry, that's an I nerd. That's Steve Jobs.
Don't know him.
You don't know who Steve Jobs is.
I don't. So I'm the nerd, I guess.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the only person on the United States who does not know who
him?
Steve Jobs is.
I don't know. Sad, right?
Apple?
Oh, yeah. That
Okay,
one uses it. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Nerd, not a nerd.
Oh, going not nerd on that.
Not. I'm gonna say nerd because I've been wrong 3 out of 4. So let me say nerd and see if I get it right.
Nerd.
He's a little nerd.
No.
Do you know who it is?
No. Looks like a dude on Glee.
That's Jerry O'Connell.
Oh.
Now, anyone who marries her,
Is not a nerd.
are you a nerd?
Sometimes.
Do you feel comfortable admitting that?
Yes. Absolutely.
You consider yourself somewhat a nerd.
In some ways, I collect records. I got some nerdy things that I do, I guess.
You are?
A nerd.
See, I personally have embraced my nerddom. How about you?
All the way.
Most definitely.
So would you consider yourselves nerd chicks?
Yes. Sure. Successful nerd chicks.
Successful nerd chicks. It's a good kind. Do you know the trick to being better socially as a nerd?
Oh, embracing your nerdness, I think.
See, I'm telling you people, this is what we have to do. Embrace your nerddom. Nerd, not nerd.
Not.
No.
I'm thinking brothers.
Not nerd.
Not nerd.
Nerd.
Mr. Green, you are in luck. We have 2 women here who think you're not a nerd, but unfortunately, that's Hank Green of the Vlog Brothers, and he's a major nerd. You are correct. That is Hank Green of the Vlog Brothers, who is definitely a nerd, who created the group known as the Nerd Biters.
Really?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Nerd, not a nerd.
Definitely a nerd.
Nerd.
Not a nerd.
Not a nerd.
She's trying to trick us.
Actually, this is a trick question. Because this guy, he's just a dork.
That's not fair. That's Ryan.
Nerd, not nerd.
Not a nerd. Smart.
She's a nerd, but she's a cool chick nerd. Oh, yes, she is a nerd. From Scooby-Doo. Right.
Poster girl of the Nerd Chicks, baby Velma. Nerd, not a nerd.
Not a nerd.
I'm still going for not nerd.
I'm gonna say nerd.
Not a nerd.
Gosh. Not.
And the answer is, hey, it's George Clooney, right? Not a nerd. And you know why he's not a nerd?
Tell me.
He's George Clooney.
That's it for our first episode of Nerd, Not a Nerd. I want to thank you for playing.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Did you enjoy playing Nerd, Not Nerd?
We did.
Yeah, it's been a great time. Thanks for inviting us.
Glad we stopped.
Nerd.
Watch the nerd chick.
I love these guys.
Watch the Nerd Chick. It's a great show.